Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Hello, you're welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning center. Today we are going to continue our lecture on non-African poetry literature. My name is Tobore Faith. So we're going to look at the poem The Pulley by George Herbert. Now we'll look at the overall background of the poem, the subject matter, the themes, and the poetic devices used. Now we'll start with the background of this poem. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the poem. The Pulley is a metaphysical poem. Now meta, the word meta means after, and the word we are looking at is metaphysical. So when we say metaphysical in poetry, it means something that is beyond the physical, beyond what the humans can conceive. So now metaphysical poetry is not a kind of poetry, but it's just a subject matter, in the sense that metaphysical poetry talks about things that the human mind cannot explain. Metaphysical poetry questions the existence of God. Metaphysical poems are usually religious, and they look at issues, wondering, asking whether things were predetermined or just coincidence. So now, just a little overview. Let's go to the poem proper. Now, the pulley. If you look at the word, the pulley, the poet George Herbert uses it to present an imagery. The pulley is a device that is used to lift heavy objects. So now what does the pulley stand for in this poem? George Herbert uses the pulley to represent God. Now the poem is looking at the creation of man, how man was created. It's a biblical allusion to how man was created. Now God said, let us grant man riches, let us grant him everything. Now God gave man everything except one thing, rest. So that is why you see in the poem that despite all that God gave to man, man lacks rest. He needs to depend on God. And so that is the overall idea of this poem. Alright, in line 3 it says, let us, said he, pour on him all that we can. God was referring to man. God's love for man is so great. However, God knew that if he bestows everything on man, humans would not depend on him. So overall, the poem is talking about the supremacy of God over the affairs of humans. Okay, so while talking about the background of the poem, I also, in a way, commented on the subject matter, which is the supremacy of God over man. Metaphysical poetry is religious, and at the same time, it's talking about the relationship between God and man. So now let's look at the themes. Of course, the first theme is man depends on God for everything. Now, the reason for man's restlessness is that man is incomplete without God. And so that is why the imagery of this pulley is used. Like I said, the pulley is a device used to lift heavy objects. Man cannot lift himself. Man cannot do everything on his own. So that is why he needs God. Another thing we'll look at here in this poem, man has limitations. Limitations in the sense that man doesn't have everything. Man has his flaws. Man must also accept that he is mortal. He is living, he is mortal. He is not supreme. Only God is supreme. And so he has limitations, he has flaws, he has weaknesses. Another thing we'll look at in this poem, God's love for man is limitless. I mean, that is what George Herbert portrays in this poem. God gave man everything, riches, willpower, strength, but he left one thing out, rest. So as men, as mortal men, we need to depend on God. And God is supreme, man is frail. God is supreme, man is frail. Man is weak, because God supersedes over everything that man does. Now lastly, we'll look at the poetic devices used in this poem. George Herbert uses alliteration. In line 6, it refers to so, strength. Now alliteration is when two consonants are used. Two or more consonants rather are repeated in an expression. For example, in line 6, he said so, strength. So, strength. That is in line 6. Line 6. Now, what alliterates here? What are the consonants that alliterate here? The dominant consonant here is S. S. So, strength. Okay. So now, another example of alliteration used in this poem. In line 17, it made reference to repining restlessness. Repining restlessness. Repining restlessness. Now if you look at this expression, R alliterates. Okay. Just to digress a little, of course, we're familiar with the alliterations, like some expressions that we use. There are some sayings like Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. Now if you look at that expression, you find out that P alliterates, so that is what we mean, alliteration. Alright, so another poetic device that is being used in this poem is biblical allusion. Now the account of this poem itself is a reference to the story of the creation of man according to Genesis 1 and 2. Remember, God said, let us make man in our own image. We will now make reference to line 3 where he said, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. So it is just a reference to the Bible story according to Genesis 1 and 2. So biblical allusion. Another poetic device used here is the imagery. The mental imagery of the pulley. Now this is common with metaphysical poetry. They tend to use objects and some symbols to represent something. Now if you look at the poem, the pulley, even without reading it itself, you begin to wonder, the pulley, the first thing that comes to your mind is a device that lifts up heavy objects. But at the end of the day, when you read through the poem, you find out that it has a deeper meaning. It is referring to God, a supreme force, helping man that is weak. Now lastly, another figure of speech that is being used here is the synecdoche. Now in line 20, the word breast, B-R-E-A-S-T, is a part that is used to represent God. We said synecdoche in our figure of speech class. Synecdoche is when you use a part of the body to represent a whole, or you use a whole to represent a part. So in that poem, when you see the reference to breast, now breast is a metaphorical reference to God. So in the course of this class, some questions will pop or be displayed on your screen so as to determine how much you have learned. So, thank you.